Since Spotify came into my life, it became much easier to listen to music and more fun. But what do you get for $12 a month? Renting music. You own nothing. You rent music, films, series, sometimes even games. Rent everything, own nothing. Some people may think that since iPhone 6 or something like that, people started using subscription services and there is nothing you can do about it. But I for sure remember how I was downloading music to my iPhone 6. So maybe in this economy it's time to go back in time and own some music and do not pay for subscription. But are there non-subscription alternatives? If you own an Android device, then yes, RVX Music. Essentially that's YouTube Music with some community-made plugins which allow you to listen to music online without any ads and skipping however you'd like. But it's barely legal and you cannot download anything, but library is amazing, same as recommendations since that's YouTube Music. And switching to YouTube Music is also easier than you may think. There are countless of migrators online, some of which, and mostly they are paid, but with some optional manual transfer functionality, and even though, how often will you migrate from Spotify to YouTube? So I think you can pay one time to migrate all of your library from Spotify to YouTube Music. The problems left here, there is no offline music, it's sort of illegal, but pretty convenient. Of course, you can always return to old roots, like CDs, vinyls, and so on. But good luck listening on the go with your vinyl recorder and SD cards. Well, it's convenient, but you need a player for that, which brings us to a dedicated player. You know, they are still alive, and actually this one costed me around $25. It has SD card slot, it has pretty decent battery, it has a speaker, radio, MP3 player, MP4 player. It also supposed to support FLAC, but I cannot enjoy it enough since I do not own any decent headset. But this one is amazing and it has headphone jack. So if you thought that era of iPod is gone, you are wrong. From minus of this device is that touch controls, even though it has sort of buttons, but touch controls are the main controls here. It's pretty minimal, it's pretty sleek, but also it has micro USB for charging, so that's not so convenient in USB Type-C era. But for sure you can find something like Hi-Fi player for $70 to $90, which will support both USB Type-C and SD card slot, and so on. But the question what's left? How do you transfer the music here and where do you get music? So the question's left about the library. How do you store music and consume music? Of course you use the MP3 player, but what about your desktop or PC? Well, here you can use either VLC media player or some other applications, but my favorite is MusicBee. You essentially store all of your music in the music folder on your Windows device, for example, and it gets all of the music. It scans this folder and gets all of the music to the application and organizes it the way you like. The application is completely free, has a lot of themes, and is pretty decent. And straight out of that, you can plug in your MP3 player either via micro USB, because my one supports only micro USB, but USB Type-C or USB cable to your laptop, or you can insert SD card to the laptop and transfer all of the music folder to folder, and just like that you have all of the library. But the question what's left is where do you supposed to get music? Here my solution is pretty simple. I own an Android device, so that's why I use RVX Music. I find music I like here and straight out of YouTube I just download the music I like using JDownloader 2. Also a pretty good application which is also completely free. Of course it won't get you any FLAC quality, but you will get pretty much the same quality you will get on Spotify unless you are listening to lossless. And of course, have I mentioned that this one player has Bluetooth, meaning that you are not meant to listen to music only via 3.5mm audio jack, but you can also connect, for example, speakers or TVS headphone headsets and so on. But for sure, you can use your phone for that as well, especially if you own an Android. It's folder to folder, essentially, and that's pretty easy as well. But for me personally, I'd prefer to have a separate device, attention span, distractions, and everything. So, with collecting library, it's a bit trickier. Officially, of course, you can also burn CDs, burn vinyls, and get your official music to your MP3 player, but as I have told before, if we are going from Spotify to completely owning the music won't be mandatory spending money, because, piracy is not stealing or something like that. Of course, officially, I burn all of my CDs, vinyls, and so on to the SD card, but unofficially, I'm looking for music on RVX, on YouTube Music, on YouTube, and sometimes I download samples. And now I can feel that I finally own the music since I have it, with no need to pay any sort of subscriptions, and of course going sort of analog way feels pretty good, like writing with a fountain pen on a Leuchtturm journal.